Imagine flipping through yellowed pages of history and finding names that whisper from the grave. 200 souls, etched in ink, yet wiped from existence. What if God himself tallied the forgotten, only for man to bury the count? Tonight, we unearth the census that defies death. The vaulted ceilings of the National Archives in Washington, D.C., loomed like the ribs of some ancient beast, their shadows stretching long in the oppressive heat of that July afternoon in 1937. Sunlight sliced through the tall, arched windows in golden blades, illuminating swirling vortices of dust, tiny ghosts suspended in the stale air. The scent was a heavy shroud, musty leather bindings mingled with the faint, acrid tang of decaying ink, a perfume that spoke of empires risen and fallen, of lives reduced to fragile notations on crumbling parchment. For Arthur Albbright, this was sanctuary. A man in his mid-50s, with wire-rimmed spectacles perpetually slipping down a hawkish nose, Arthur moved through the aisles with the precision of a priest tending an altar. His gloved hands, white cotton, always immaculate, brushed over spines of ledgers as if caressing sacred texts. Obsession defined him, not the wild-eyed frenzy of madmen, but a quiet, unyielding devotion to the threads of history. He believed in the sanctity of records, that every name inscribed was a covenant between the living and the dead, a bulwark against oblivion. That day, his task was monumental, yet mundane to outsiders, cross-referencing the 1890 census with later federal rolls. Boxes upon boxes of microfilm unspooled before him, a labyrinth of names, dates, occupations, farmers, blacksmiths, midwives, each entry a snapshot of America's restless expansion. The nation had been a cauldron then, boiling with immigrants and pioneers pushing westward, quantifying themselves in a bid for order amid chaos. Arthur found poetry in it, the rhythm of families growing, migrating, fading. He paused often, adjusting his lamp's dim glow, his breath steady as he connected dots across decades. A Johnson in Ohio becoming a rancher in Kansas, a widowed Smith raising sons who would fight in wars yet unborn. These were not mere statistics. They were echoes of divine providence, lives woven into the grand design. Each soul accounted for in the eyes of eternity. But the air grew thicker that humid Tuesday, the humidity pressing like an unseen hand on his shoulders. Sweat beaded on his brow as he delved into a forgotten corner of the stacks, a box marked Miscellaneous Western Territories, unprocessed. The label itself was a heresy in his ordered world, unprocessed? In 1937? The ribbon binding the schedules inside was brittle, snapping like old bones as he untied it. The pages crackled under his touch, releasing a puff of dust that danced in the light like forbidden spirits. Standard at first, homesteads in nascent Wyoming and Montana, names blurring into familiarity, Peterson, Miller, Davies. Ordinary lives in an extraordinary land. Then, the page turned, and the world tilted. The script leaped out elegant, almost calligraphic, with flourishes on the capitals that bespoke education, refinement. Location, Havenwood Settlement, unorganized territory, Wyoming-Montana border. Arthur's frown deepened, creasing his forehead like a fault line. He knew the maps of 1890 intimately, the jagged boundaries shifting like sand, ghost towns blooming and withering overnight. Havenwood? No echo in his memory. He rose, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like a distant scream, and consulted his atlases, dog-eared volumes of territorial surveys, gazetteers yellowed with age. Nothing. No dot on any map, no footnote in any historical ledger. It was a void, a blank space where reality should have been. Curiosity ignited first a spark in his scholarly soul. Perhaps a transient mining camp, logs felled and dreams dashed before ink could dry on deeds. But as he read deeper, unease slithered in, cold and serpentine. These schedules were no ordinary tally. Beyond names and ages, columns detailed condition of health, date of arrival, and strangest of all, observation status. Entries repeated. Active, ongoing, monitored. What census probes so invasively? This wasn't enumeration, it was surveillance, a watchful eye cast over souls in isolation. He counted them, 214 names. Men like Caleb Miller, 42, community overseer, women like Margaret Griggs, 28, domestic support, children, infants with no surnames, as if born into anonymity. Families clustered together, their occupations vague, ethereal, sustenance provider, moral guide. The ink seemed darker here, pressed harder, as if the enumerator had borne down with urgency. Arthur's pulse quickened. He leaned closer, the lamp's heat warming his face like a confessor's breath. These people felt real, too real. Yet, where were they? He spent hours cross-referencing, his fingers flying over indexes. Official 1890 census for adjacent counties, absent. Land deeds from territorial offices, silent. Birth records, death certificates, even church registries from frontier missions, nothing. Military dispatches from forts guarding the borders, no mention of a settlement, no patrols diverted. It was erasure, deliberate and absolute. 214 lives, inscribed with care, then expunged from the annals of time. Ghosts in the machine of history, their existence a sin against the order Arthur worshipped. The implications chilled him, a frost spreading through his veins despite the sweltering room. How does a community vanish? Not dissolve, erased. Was it plague, sweeping through like divine judgment? Or something darker, a human hand wielding the quill of oblivion? The dust now felt oppressive, each mote a soul pleading for remembrance. Arthur thought of biblical ledgers, the book of life, where names are written or blotted out based on deeds. Was this a mortal mimicry? A hubris of man playing God, tallying then untallying? He felt a spiritual weight, a call to redemption. These names deserve light, lest their haunting legacy curse the forgetful. His obsession bloomed that night, under the archive's flickering bulbs. Sleep evaded him, visions of empty prairies haunted his dreams, wind whispering forgotten names. By dawn, he returned, driven by a fervor that bordered on the prophetic. The handwriting became his fixation, the elegant loops, the firm strokes. Not the scrawl of a rough frontiersman, but the penmanship of a learned soul, perhaps tormented. He scoured other 1890 documents, comparing scripts until his eyes burned. Days blurred into a ritual, coffee cooling untouched, notes piling like offerings. The breakthrough came in a dusty crate of personal effects, donations from families of deceased bureaucrats. Elias Thorne, Census Bureau, 1890 to 1895. The journal inside matched, worn leather, pages filled with that same flourish. Arthur's hands trembled as he opened it, the spine creaking like a confessional door. Early entries painted Elias as an idealist, late 20s, from upstate New York. A widower's son, he wrote of his mother's frail health, his sister's aspirations. Census work was his vocation, a holy calling to count every sheep in the flock, ensuring no one strayed from the national fold. Data is democracy, he penned, each name a vote in eternity's ballot. His assignments chronicled the frontier's pulse, bustling saloons in Cheyenne, sodhouses enduring blizzards. He added notes, poetic flourishes on pioneers' resilience, their faith in manifest destiny. Then, spring 1890, a shift. A sealed directive from the Department of Public Health Initiatives, a phantom agency, unlisted in official roles. Task: enumerate a remote settlement, sensitive due to unique health circumstances. Discretion mandated, details sparse. Elias's excitement leaped from the page, a chance to serve the unseen, to bring light to shadows. Yet, trepidation lurked, the map marks an X in wilderness, God's forgotten corner? Arthur absorbed it, piecing the mosaic. Elias, unwitting prophet, rode into the unknown. Official. Records confirmed, brief tenure, resignation in 95 for health reasons. Then, vanishing like his subjects. Arthur consulted peers, his voice hushed in the archive's sanctity. Dr. Eleanor Vance, expert in migrations, arched an eyebrow over tea-stained notes. Impossible, Albbright. A town of 214? No traces? Perhaps a quarantine camp, dissolved post-crisis. But the journal swayed her, Elias's growing disquiet, mentions of unnatural isolation. This department, it reeks of shadows. Public health in 1890 was maritime quarantines, not inland secrets. What affliction demanded such veils? The puzzle deepened, not error, but intent. A veil drawn over sin? Arthur pondered moral symbolism, the census as confession, names as indictments. Were these 214 judged unworthy? Divine retribution mirrored in bureaucracy? The journal became his scripture, guiding him to Elias's path. That journey, fraught with omens, began in Cheyenne's dust-choked streets. Elias, astride his mare, provisions strapped, rifle gleaming. Plains unfolded, sage-scented winds, foothills rising like ancient guardians. Towns dwindled, wooden shacks defiant against elements. Interactions warmed him, shared stews with homesteaders, tales of gold strikes and Indian skirmishes by firelight. Deeper in, the land turned hostile. Trails narrowed to whispers, forests closed in with pine needle hush. Trappers evaded eyes when Havenwood arose. One, grizzled and scarred, spat, "Ain't no such place. And if there were, it'd be cursed, devils dance there." At a trading post, the proprietor, hands shaking like autumn leaves, paled. "Turn back, enumerator. Some sins ain't meant for counting. That's where the lost go to be observed." His whisper hung, heavy as fog. Elias pressed on, faith his shield. But doubt crept, was this mission mercy or malediction? The knapsacks loomed across, perhaps, marking burial or salvation. Arthur, tracing it in 1937, felt the chill, a legacy of erasure, or human hubris defied divine ledger. What awaited in Havenwood? A community clinging to life, or a graveyard of the uncounted? The answers lay buried, but Arthur vowed to exhume them, lest the ghosts rise in judgment. The warnings lingered like specters in Elias Thorne's mind as he pressed onward, each cryptic utterance from trappers and traders weaving a shroud of foreboding around his journey. The silence that enveloped those encounters was thicker than mountain fog, pregnant with the ghosts of untold tales, rumors of cursed lands where men vanished, swallowed by the earth's indifferent maw. Elias, ever the rationalist, schooled in the enlightenment of data and democracy, dismissed them as the folklore of the frontier, tall tales spun by lonely souls to ward off the wilderness's vast loneliness. Yet, doubt gnawed at him, a subtle erosion like wind sculpting stone. With every mile, the seed of unease took root, its tendrils coiling around his resolve. The terrain conspired in this growing malaise, transforming from the open, life-affirming plains into a desolate tableau of muted despair. Verdant grasses yielded to barren earth, cracked and parched as if scorched by some divine wrath. Trees thinned, their limbs contorted in eternal supplication, branches like skeletal fingers clawing at an uncaring sky. The air hung heavy, stripped of vitality, the incessant chirp of insects silenced, the mournful cry of coyotes absent. In his journal, Elias scrawled with a trembling hand, "This land breathes not in rhythm with creation, but holds its breath in anticipation of judgment." The wind, once roaring him, now murmurs secrets too dire to voice. He scanned the horizon obsessively, not for bandits or beasts, but for absolution, a sign that this mission was mercy, not malediction. Biblical echoes haunted him. Was this a modern Sodom, isolated for its sins? Or a testing ground, like Job's afflictions, where faith was forged in suffering? Weeks of grueling passage blurred into a pilgrimage of endurance, dense pine thickets where needles carpeted the ground like a shroud, rocky ascents that tested horse and man alike, streams running cold and clear but tasting of minerals that hinted at buried poisons. Exhaustion etched lines on Elias's face, mirroring the weathered maps he clutched. Then, cresting a jagged ridge, the valley unfurled below, a hidden basin cradled by unforgiving peaks, as if God had scooped it out with a vengeful hand. Havenwood lay nestled there, not a thriving outpost but a precise assemblage of structures, 24 gray edifices in geometric order, orbiting a central hall like planets around a dying sun. A formidable timber fence encircled it all, not a mere boundary but a bulwark, its heights crowned with barbed wire that glinted like thorns in the waning light. No plumes of smoke curled from chimneys, no laughter echoed from lanes, no herds dotted the fields. It was a still life in desolation, bathed in the golden hues of a sun that seemed reluctant to illuminate such a place. Dismounting, Elias's boots crunched on gravel that sounded like brittle bones underfoot. A chill raced up his spine, unrelated to the crisp mountain air, a primal shiver, as if his soul sensed the profane. The trapper's grunts, the trader's whispers, the land's hush all converged into revelation. This was no haven, but a sepulchre disguised as sanctuary. His census forms, symbols of inclusion and order, now felt inadequate, papyrus shields against an encroaching abyss. He inhaled deeply, the air tasting of isolation, adjusted his hat with resolve born of duty, and descended. Each step echoed in his mind like a tolling bell, a premonition of doom he could not name. Was this the valley of the shadow of death, where even shepherds feared to tread? Crossing into the valley felt like piercing a veil between worlds, a threshold where the natural gave way to the engineered unnatural. Up close, Havenwood's uniformity assaulted the senses. Buildings of weathered wood, painted a monotonous gray that blended with the overcast sky, as if camouflaged against divine scrutiny. The central edifice loomed largest, its steep roof evoking a chapel twisted into administrative austerity, perhaps a hall for gatherings or judgments. Nearby, a smaller structure gleamed with unnatural sterility, windows opaque, doors reinforced, an infirmary or a laboratory of secrets? The fence, now towering overhead, revealed its menace, posts driven deep, wire barbed like a crown of suffering, evoking Christ's thorns in a perversion of sacrifice. But it was the silence that clawed deepest, a void so absolute it pressed against eardrums like an invisible weight. No canine barks shattered the quiet, no avian calls pierced the air, no human murmurs animated the scene. The wind, Elias's faithful companion, faltered at the boundary, leaving a stasis that suffocated. Then, the odor assailed him, faint at first, a metallic tang sweetened with something cloying, like copper pennies steeped in syrup. It grew insistent nearer the gate, evoking blood long dried, mingled with antiseptics that masked but did not erase underlying decay. Biblical plagues flickered in his thoughts, blood in the Nile, death in the air. Was this a modern affliction, man-made hubris inviting heavenly retribution? At the gate, a figure materialized from the central building, an elder, gaunt and spectral, in his late 60s. Lines furrowed his face like canyons carved by grief, skin pale as parchment stretched over bone. His eyes, piercing blue, sunk in shadowed sockets, held the weariness of ages, a gaze that had witnessed too much and hoped for naught. Movements deliberate, energy rationed, he approached with the solemnity of a high priest. Afternoon, Elias ventured, his voice booming unnaturally in the hush, shattering it like glass. Elias Thorne, U.S. Census Bureau. Here to count the folks of Havenwood. The man studied him, a fleeting shadow resignation? Amusement, crossing those azure depths. Expected you, Mr. Thorne, he rasped, voice like wind through dry reeds, laced with quiet command. Caleb Miller, elder here. Enter Havenwood. The gate swung open, unlocked yet ominous. Leading his mare inside, Elias spotted sentinels, two young men by a gray hut, rifles cradled not aggressively but with intent, faces ashen masks devoid of warmth. Their dark garb evoked mourners, eyes tracking him like predators in wait. A knot twisted in Elias's gut. This was no welcoming committee, but wardens of the damned. Caleb guided him to an austere cabin, bare walls, a cot, a stool, clean but comfortless. Your quarters, he intoned, seating himself with a sigh that echoed epics. You seek our truths, names, years, tales. Elias nodded, unfurling forms with hands that betrayed a slight tremor. Duty demands it, Mr. Miller. Every soul counts in this great nation. A chuckle escaped Caleb, hollow, mirthless, like bones rattling. Counted, aye. But to what end? His gaze distant, he unraveled the thread. 3 years passed, recruits from Midwest ruins, farmers bankrupted by blight, miners choked by dust, families fractured by famine. Lured by promises, verdant lands, communal bonds, under a government health initiative. Escape the city's plagues, Caleb murmured, eyes clouding. Children strong, free of consumption's grip. A doctor, supplies, redemption. Elias scribbled, probing, journeys orchestrated, trains rattling through nights, wagons creaking under loads, all herded by uniformed overseers. Arrival, controlled for health study, confined within wire for protection. As Caleb spoke, residents drifted by pallid phantoms and rote tasks, eyes averted, steps measured. Children played listlessly, laughter absent, limbs frail as reeds. The metallic sweet miasma permeated all, a spectral perfume of suffering unspoken. That eve, enumeration deepened the dread. Ira Finch, ex-teacher from Ohio, whispered in shadows, dignity eroded, eyes haunted. Books promised, minds to mold. Now, fog clouds their thoughts. The affliction devours spirit as flesh. She described coughs racking bodies, a wasting that dimmed vitality. Thomas Davies, once a colossus in Pennsylvania pits, now gray-skinned, breath labored, clean air to scour black lung. Lies. We linger in limbo, awaiting, what? Samuel Sutter, Kansas tiller, soil fertile, yet yields poison. Water tainted, metallic bite. Margaret Griggs, cradling infant William Bowen, babe silent, skin veined like marble, doctor vows healing. But he observes, notes, never aids. Tears traced her cheeks, a silent supplication. Then, the figure, Dr. Alastair Hicks, white-coated apparition from the sterile sanctum. Tall, severe, eyes like ice shards, clinical, devoid of soul. A nod, curt as a scalpel slice, dismissed Elias. The mosaic formed, no sanctuary, but prison. Health study a facade for observation, fence a cage, pallor the mark of experimented upon lambs. Residents not cured, but catalogued specimens in a godless trial. Elias's role transmuted, from counter to chronicler of atrocity. Forms became indictments, each entry a testament against erasure. He noted not just data, but despair's details, trembling hands, hollow coughs, eyes pleading for deliverance. The tuberculosis study, unveiled as sham, lured as vulnerable, promised cure for a virulent strain. Havenwood, faux sanatorium, pristine yet poisonous. Reality, no elixirs, only scrutiny. Hicks's cadre measured decline, stethoscopes cold on chests, vials filled with blood and breath, logs of decay without intervention. Ira's frail voice, they probe our essence, extract our agony. Questions endless, mercy none. Elias pondered the spiritual abyss, man playing creator, tallying suffering as divine fiat. Were these 214 the Forsaken, a modern leper colony where science supplanted salvation? Guilt weighed him, his forms, once redemptive, now complicit in cataloging doom. Yet, resolve hardened, he would bear witness, smuggling truth like scripture from exile. The metallic scent now reeked of sin, the silence a chorus of condemned souls. In Havenwood, divine justice loomed absent, retribution deferred, but Elias vowed to summon it, lest the erased rise in eternal accusation. The confessions poured forth like tainted water from a poisoned well, each word a droplet of despair etching deeper into Elias Thorne's soul. In the dim confines of Havenwood's cabins, where lamplight flickered like faltering faith, the residents unveiled their torments with voices hushed by fear and frailty. Ira Finch, her frame bent like a willow under storm, clutched Elias's sleeve with fingers cold as grave soil. Her eyes, once alight with the spark of knowledge, now dimmed mirrors reflecting endless night. The children, she murmured, her breath a fragile sigh carrying the metallic tang that permeated the air. Their little bodies waste away, Mr. Thorne. Limbs thin as reeds, skin stretched taut over bones like parchment scriptures unread. We were promised futures blooming like spring meadows, health, laughter, learning. Instead, their eyes grow distant, staring into voids where dreams once danced. They cough in the night, wet rasps that echo like accusations against the heavens. Tears traced paths down her cheeks, salty rivulets mingling with the ever-present scent of decay and disinfectant. They swore life eternal in this haven. But it's a mockery, a false Eden where the serpent wears a white coat. Elias's pen scratched across the forms, capturing not just facts but fragments of shattered souls. He thought of biblical innocence, the slaughter of the firstborn, plagues visiting the unrighteous. Was Havenwood a divine test, or man's arrogant imitation? Thomas Davies, his once mighty chest now a bellows wheezing with effort, leaned close, his breath hot and labored against Elias's ear. The man's skin gleamed with an unhealthy sheen, gray as ash from sacrificial fires. The tonic they force upon us, he rasped, each word punctuated by a hacking cough that sprayed fine mist, red-tinged in the lamplight. Tastes of oblivion bland as water from the river Lethe, or worse, laced with poisons to dull our wills. It quiets the fire in our bellies, turns rebellion to resignation. His eyes, bloodshot and fierce, darted to the shadows where guards loomed. Those silent sentinels, rifles slung like crosses of judgment, patrolled the fence's perimeter with mechanical precision. Not protectors, these men, Thomas growled, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. Jailers. They herd us like lambs to slaughter, ensuring no soul strays from this cursed fold. One step beyond, and you're marked, vanished into the wilderness, or worse. The air in the cabin grew thicker, heavy with the cloying sweetness that Elias now recognized as the perfume of slow death, blood, bile, and bogus bombs. Samuel Sutter, the weathered farmer whose hands bore the calluses of honest toil, hunched over a rickety table, his fingers tracing invisible furrows in the wood. Hicks mutters of control groups and variables, he confided, eyes flicking nervously toward the medical building's sterile glow. That structure squatted like a false temple, its windows emitting a cold, unnatural light that pierced the gathering dusk. He calls our agony sacrifice for mankind, as if we're offerings on science's altar. But what God demands the slow unraveling of flesh? Crops fail here, twisted and pale, mirroring our fate. The soil drinks our blood, yields only thorns. Elias felt a chill, evoking Cain's cursed ground, rejecting the fruits of labor. These people were not just afflicted, they were forsaken, their suffering a perversion of redemption. Horror coiled in Elias's gut like a serpent, tightening with every revelation. He sought out Dr. Alastair Hicks, feigning scholarly curiosity under the guise of professional courtesy. The doctor's office was a sanctum of sterility, walls lined with charts graphing declines like descending souls, shelves burdened with vials glinting like forbidden elixirs. Hicks stood tall, his white coat pristine as a shroud, face chiseled with intellectual arrogance, eyes piercing as judgment's sword. "A groundbreaking endeavor, Mr. Thorne," he intoned, voice smooth and devoid of warmth, gesturing to the valley beyond the window where pale figures shuffled like ghosts. "We chart the unchecked march of a virulent pulmonary scourge, in isolation etiology unveiled, containment strategies forged in data's fire." His words sliced the air, clinical and cold, evoking a godless genesis where man rewrote creation's code. Elias pressed, voice steady despite the storm within, "And treatment, doctor?" "Surely mercy tempers inquiry." Hicks's gaze narrowed, a flicker of disdain crossing his features like a shadow over stone. "Intervention corrupts purity, Mr. Thorne. These subjects, by their consent or circumstance, advance the greater good. Sentiment is the enemy of science, empathy, a contaminant." The declaration hung, sharp as a blade, revealing Hicks's worldview: humans as vessels, suffering as scripture in a macabre Bible of progress. Elias recoiled inwardly, seeing the doctor as a false prophet, sacrificing lambs on altars of ambition. Biblical echoes thundered, the Pharisees' hypocrisy, valuing law over life. Was this divine retribution for hubris, or a void where God had withdrawn? Internal tempests raged in Elias, duty clashing with decency, oath against outrage. As a federal servant, he was bound by chains of bureaucracy, yet what unfolded here violated every moral covenant, every whisper of the soul's sanctity. Open defiance was folly. Hicks's authority, buttressed by armed shadows and the unyielding fence, reigned supreme in this forsaken realm. The barrier, topped with barbs like a crown of thorns, encircled not just land but lives, a symbol of entrapment echoing Eden's expulsion. Elias's recourse: subtlety in documentation. In the census's margins, where bland remarks were expected, he inscribed veiled indictments, cryptic as prophetic scrolls. Beside Ira Finch, subject: laments educational voids, notes juvenile vitality's eclipse amid affliction. For Thomas, respiratory torment acute, tonics virtue queried. Margaret Griggs and infant William, neonate pallid, inert, maternal dread of surveillance profound. These were not notes but testaments, seeds of truth sown in hopes of future harvest, when some discerning eye might decode the damnation. Under cover of twilight, when shadows lengthened like accusing fingers, Elias stole toward the medical edifice. Its facade gleamed unnaturally, a beacon of false hope amid the gloom. The door to the records chamber resisted, locked as a confessional sealed against sinners. Through a grimy pane, he glimpsed the hoard, ledgers stacked like unholy tomes, charts plotting descents into abyss, personal relics, faded photographs, trinkets echoing lives extinguished. Here lay the core, the study's sinister blueprint, proof of perversion. Residents, sensing his quiet insurgency, confided bolder, tales of escapees scaling wire, only to vanish. Swallowed by night, Caleb Miller breathed, his form silhouetted against fading light. Hicks decrees relocated for care, but we know the lie. Graves unmarked, souls unshriven. The fence transformed in Elias's mind, not mere wood and wire, but a gravestone etched with oblivion. Resolve crystallized, sharp as dawn's first ray. Elias vowed completion, every name etched, every detail a defiance against deletion. His pen, once bureaucratic implement, now a lance of light-piercing darkness, a tool of redemption, tallying the tallyless. These 2:14, not data, but divine images marred by mortal sin. He pondered spiritual legacies, the book of life, where erasure meant damnation. Would his act summon justice, or invite his own unmaking? Tension thickened like fog rolling from the peaks, a palpable veil smothering Havenwood. Crick's scrutiny intensified, his gaze following Elias like a hawk's shadow over prey. The doctor's composure masked suspicion, Elias's probing exceeded enumeration's bounds. One leaden afternoon, as Elias concluded with an elderly matron, her voice a threadbare whisper recounting lost kin, Crick's materialized, aura chill as winter's breath. "Mr. Thorne," he purred, tone-polished menace. "Your thoroughness impresses, yet borders on intrusion. Our charges are fragile, agitation undermines equilibrium." No cordiality, only veiled blade. Elias met the stare, masking turmoil with diligence's facade. "Merely precision, doctor. The Bureau demands fidelity in facts." He brandished forms, innocuous surfaces hiding coded cries. Crick's advanced, eyes slits of steel. "Some truths, Mr. Thorne, serve higher ends, national veil, initiative sanctity. Anomalies, overlooked. The thread coiled, sanitize or suffer." Fear surged, but Elias held firm. "Discretion noted, yet integrity compels completeness in archives. A gambit, risking all." Crick's appraised, predatory gleam. "Loyalty and silence, virtues equal. Tread wisely." He departed, leaving dread's residue. Final days blurred in frantic fervor, interviews rushed, heart burdened by impending abandonment. These souls, last outsiders gaze upon them. Dusk cloaked a final commune with Caleb, all named Mr. Miller. Unforgotten. Caleb's eyes, abyssal sorrow, welled. Blessing amid curse. We fade, but acknowledgement, salvation's spark. Remember, Mr. Thorne. Proclaim our existence. Dawn brought expulsion, guard escorted to gate, satchel heavy with truth, journal clasped like scripture. Mounting, Elias glanced back, spectral faces at windows, pressing glass like imprisoned spirits. Caleb stood sentinel, hand uplifted, mournful benediction. Image burned eternal, tableau of torment, plea for posterity. Return, paranoia-plagued odyssey. Shadows pursued, routes twisted through pines whispering warnings. Mind churned, exposed Sand's self-sacrifice? Evidence's fate? Cheyenne's bureau, no acclaim, but summons. Mr. Harrison, stern as judgment's arbiter, loomed. Troubling missive from Crick's, intrusive, disruptive. Elias's veins iced. Duty fulfilled, sir. Havenwood Reel, 214 enumerated. Harrison thundered, fist crashing desk like thunderbolt. No such place. Names phantoms. Revise, uninhabited void. Elias protested, truth, sir. Lives witnessed. Harrison hissed, order absolute, from pinnacles of power. Erase, or forfeit all. Trapped in webs of complicity, Elias faced the abyss, compliance or condemnation. Spiritual weight crushed, betray the tallied, or join the erased? Divine justice hovered, demanding reckoning. Elias Thorne sat in the dim-lit office of the Cheyenne Census Bureau, the weight of betrayal pressing upon him like the unyielding Rockies themselves. The air was stale, laced with the scent of ink and aged wood, a far cry from the metallic sweetness that still haunted his nightmares. Mr. Harrison's eyes bored into him, cold as the bureaucratic machine he represented, unfeeling, inexorable. Elias's mind raced through the abyss of choices, defiance, which would shatter his life like fragile glass, exposing him to ruin, perhaps a quiet disappearance echoing those of Havenwood's escapees. The evidence, his meticulously inscribed schedules, laced with veiled indictments, would be consigned to flames, ashes scattering like forgotten prayers. Or compliance, a mask of submission hiding a deeper rebellion. His gaze fell upon the census forms, names glowing faintly in the lamplight: Caleb Miller, Ira Finch, Margaret Griggs, souls tallied not for salvation, but survival in memory. These were not mere entries, they were covenants, biblical in their solemnity, akin to the genealogies of Scripture where lineages preserved the divine promise against oblivion. With a voice barely rising above a whisper, cracked like parched earth, Elias yielded, "Yes, sir. I understand." His hands, trembling as if bearing the cross of his conscience, reclaimed the documents. Outwardly, he would forge the forgery, a sanitized ledger declaring the valley barren, uninhabited, a void in the national tapestry. But inwardly, resolve ignited like a prophet's fire. The originals, pregnant with truth, would not perish. He envisioned them as sacred scrolls, hidden from Herod's edict, awaiting a future revelation. Back in his modest quarters, under the flicker of a solitary candle casting shadows that danced like accusing spirits, Elias bundled the schedules with his journal pages filled with the journey's torments, the valley's silences, the residents' pleas. He would secret them into the archive's depths, a labyrinthine vault where only the diligent, the divinely guided, might unearth them. In this act, Elias transformed from enumerator to eternal witness, ensuring that even if these 214 were decreed non-existent by mortal decree, their essence would endure, a haunting legacy defying man's erasure, awaiting divine justice. Decades later, in the vaulted hush of the 1937 National Archives, Arthur Albbright felt an ethereal bond with Elias Thorne, as if their souls communed across the veil of time. The journal's yellowed pages, scripted in that elegant hand now frayed by despair, chronicled the idealism's eclipse, the westward ride full of purpose, the valley's descent into damnation, the bureau's confrontation, the coerced betrayal, the clandestine preservation. Arthur traced the words with gloved fingers, sensing Elias's turmoil, the sleepless vigils where pale faces materialized in dreams, the metallic odor clinging like sin's residue. It was a portrait of integrity ensnared in institutional shadows, a man who glimpsed the abyss where science supplanted the sacred, treating humans as expendable in pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Arthur pondered the spiritual resonance, Elias as a modern Jeremiah, lamenting a nation's hidden abominations, his records a lamentation against forgetfulness. Yet, fragments were insufficient, Arthur craved the conspiracy's full silhouette. He delved deeper, cross-referencing Elias's allusions to the phantom Department of Public Health initiatives. This entity was spectral, its traces faint as whispers in windswept prairies. Hours blurred into days amid stacks of congressional annals, appropriations bills from the 1880s emerging like buried relics, cryptic allocations for experimental health protocols in uncharted territories, funds lavish yet oversight scant, veiled in jargon of containment and demographic essays. No humanitarian bent, these were blueprints for isolation, echoes of pharaonic decrees segregating the afflicted. Arthur unearthed redacted missives between Dr. Alastair Hicks and nascent public health service luminaries, ink-blotted pages speaking of auspicious outcomes from Havenwood, lauding unparalleled longitudinal scrutiny. Subjects, not souls; protocols, not palliatives. The language chilled like frost on gravestones, clinical detachment masking moral vacancy, man arrogating God's prerogative to weigh lives on scales of utility. The site's fate beckoned next. A terse 1896 dispatch surfaced, Havenwood decommissioned owing to ecological exigencies. No tally of the tallied, no exodus chronicled, just closure's sterile seal, as if the valley had exhaled its inhabitants into ether. Arthur's spirit stirred with unrest, a call to pilgrimage. He petitioned leave, packed essentials in a weathered satchel, maps, notebooks, a compass symbolizing truth's navigation, and boarded a train westward. The 1937 rails hummed smoother than Elias's horse-trod paths, yet the wilderness retained its primal menace, vast plains yielding to jagged peaks, air crisp with pine and promise unfulfilled. In a dusty frontier town, he enlisted Jebediah Finch, a grizzled rancher whose lineage rooted deep in the soil, face weathered like ancient bark, eyes squinting against horizons of memory. Havenwood? Jebediah drawled, straw twitching in his jaw like a pendulum of time. Ghost yarns from my kin. Valley that up and vanished earth's maw yawning wide. Grandpappy spun tales of eerie glows, suited specters slinking bout, but reckoned whiskey-fueled phantasms. Folks steer clear, say it's cursed ground, where winds wail names long lost. Days of trek ensued, horseback through thickets where branches clawed like repentant sinners, over ridges echoing with unseen avalanches. The valley revealed itself at last, a basin reclaimed by wilderness, overgrown with brambles and wildflowers, blooming defiantly over scars. The fence's skeleton had dissolved, timber pilfered by time's thieves, but foundations lingered, faint rectangular ghosts of cabins, clustered like huddled faithful. The central hall's base loomed larger, authoritative. Nearby, the infirmary's outline evoked a forsaken sanctuary, its sterile purpose now entombed in earth. Arthur wandered the ruins, boots sinking into loam rich with decay's perfume, pine resin mingling with damp soil, a natural incense overriding the old metallic taint. Silence reigned profound, a mournful hush as if the land itself grieved, winds whispering psalms for the departed. He knelt, unearthing a rusted tin soldier, half-buried, its painted uniform faded like forgotten valor, a child's relic, symbol of innocence sacrificed on altars of ambition. Biblical visions assailed him, the valley of dry bones, awaiting breath's revival, or Gehenna, where refuse burned eternal. He conversed with scattered elders in ramshackle homesteads, wrinkled visages recounting rumors. Strangers came, built quick, then poof, gone. No wagons out, no smoke trails. Just quiet, like God turned his back. Collective amnesia shrouded the 214, their exodus a myth unspun, lives evaporated into legend's mist. Returning to Washington, Arthur's determination forged anew, tempered in the fires of revelation. He had touched the tangible void, ruins bearing witness to existence, absence screaming of annihilation. The government's machinery, bills, letters, decrees, unveiled a dehumanizing calculus, where progress devoured the vulnerable, erasing them to sanitize history. Spiritual undertones deepened. This was hubris akin to Babel, man erecting towers of knowledge atop human foundations, inviting divine toppling. Elias's sacrifice, his hidden hoard, must not dissolve into dust. Truth, however harrowing, demanded guardianship. In the archive's sanctified silence, Arthur confronted his crossroads. Elias's later entries, script devolving into jagged pleas, chronicled post-resignation despair, anonymous missives to presses and potentates, rebuffed with disdain or danger. They seal fates with silence, Elias penned, ghosts bureaucratic, not ethereal, erased by quill and quiescence. I bear their yoke, heavy as Calvary's beam. His 1920 demise, pulmonary woes, hinted at Havenwood's lingering curse, physical or psychic, a martyr's end for truth's custodian. Arthur mirrored this, exposed brazenly, risking evidence as pyre and personal peril? Or safeguard subtly, entrusting to posterity? Echoing Elias, he chose the latter, a quiet atonement, preserving against Erasure's tide. Weeks unfolded in meticulous ritual, documents collated, a bespoke code devised obscure as esoteric runes, cross-linked to banal files in a maze defying casual seekers. Into a fireproof reliquary went the Census originals, journal, redacted proofs, a sacred ark against deluge. Filed in the archive's remotest recesses, amid forgotten tomes, it awaited resurrection by some future seer. Arthur reflected on institutional monstrosity, the fragility of existence under power's boot, where systems devour souls for data's sake. Havenwood symbolized not spectral dread, but plausible abomination, bureaucracy's blade, ethics forsaken for ambition's idol. Years waned, Arthur aged, silver-haired, lenses thickened, yet Havenwood's specter endured. Amid towering shelves, he pondered, would his breadcrumb trail summon a successor? Official annals omitted the anomaly, maps blank, narratives pristine. The 214 lingered as apparitions known to few. Elias, Arthur, and the dust-veiled vault. Horror resided not in phantoms, but plausibility, man's constructs as voracious beasts, observing agony without intervention, then blotting traces. Visions persisted, Elias descending into silence, Caleb's farewell wave, children's muted play, bodies yielding to engineered plague, spirits unabsolved. As twilight gilded the archive's halls, Arthur sealed his ledger, day's labor's done. In western wilds, a valley slumbered overgrown, secrets interred. Within bureaucratic bowels, a census slumbered, testament to the uncounted, whispering defiance against erasure. Lingering query echoed, how many shadowed Havenwoods? Communities decreed null, awaiting exhumation? Archives cradled multitudes, some slumbering in sanctity, others demanding disturbance, yet all, in divine ledger, eternally inscribed.